Welcome to the Brand and Market Podcast, where branding clarity meets marketing strategy. I'm your host, Allie Haney, founder of Brand and Market, a boutique agency dedicated to helping small businesses craft intentional brands and effective marketing plans. Each week, I share practical tips and insights to help you, especially those of you in real estate-related industries, build a standout brand to attract your brand's biggest fans. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. I'm your host, Allie Haney, and today we are going to jump into a piece of your brand strategy. It is a piece that people often overlook when they are starting their business because they're just trying to get their systems and their marketing up off the ground. But I can assure you that this part of your brand strategy is extremely important in terms of your messaging and how you differentiate yourself from others in your area. That piece of brand strategy is your UVP, or your unique value proposition. It goes by a couple different names. It could be a UVP, a USP, your unique sales proposition, or it could simply be called a differentiator. What it boils down to is your UVP is what makes you different than everyone else that's offering the same service as you. In this instance, we're going to go with realtors. So, what makes you different from the other 15 realtors in your immediate market? Now, that's my own way of explaining what a UVP is, but in honor of the previous individual episode that I did all about AI, I'm going to give you AI's definition of what a UVP is. Chad, our marketing assistant, ChatGPT, says that a UVP is a concise and clear statement that communicates distinct benefits, advantages, and value that a product or service offers to its target. It's really what boils down to what makes you different. It is really imperative that you know what this is right off the bat with no hesitation. Otherwise, your messaging will likely blend in with your competition's messaging because you might be looking at your competition online and mimicking or mirroring what you see, which is going to ultimately dilute your messaging. It's not going to get to your ideal client, and it's going to then ultimately impact your business. So if you're a realtor, your UVP may be part of your client experience. It may be part of your personality, especially if you run a highly personal brand online. If you're a short-term rental owner, the property itself may be what differentiates you from the rest of the properties in your area. The view could be the differentiator, or the interior design could be the differentiator. It could even be the amenities that you offer that are different than everyone else's in your area. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Regardless, you have to know your UVP in order to stand out from the crowd. We want to attract our ideal client and repel those that are not a good fit, and defining your UVP and shouting it from the rooftops is a great way to do that. If your UVP isn't obvious to your audience, then ultimately you have a brand strategy problem. When I am conducting a brand analysis or a marketing analysis for a client, I have an onboarding questionnaire, and I'm pretty thorough throughout that questionnaire. I ask them about their brand's mission, their brand's values, their brand colors and fonts, and all of that, because I'm checking for consistency across the board on all online platforms. But there's one specific thing that I don't ask them on that questionnaire. Can you guess what it is? It's their UVP. And I'll tell you why I don't ask for their UVP. As I'm going through and looking at their online presence, I'm going through that online presence as if I were a potential client for them. So I'm looking at their website, their email marketing. I'll sign up for their funnel if they have one. I'm looking at their social media, their blog, any type of online directory that I can find about them. Like, I'm going deep into this online sleuthing to see what I can dig up about them. Throughout all of that research, I should very clearly be able to tell what their UVP is. And if I can't, then that's one of the first things that I bring up on our call after I complete my brand analysis, because that's a huge red flag if I can't tell when I'm looking for your UVP what it is, because that means that your clients that aren't trained in brand strategy are certainly not going to know what differentiates you from the next 15 people that do the same thing as you. So they're not going to be able to tell whether or not they're a good fit for you based off of that lacking clarity. Let me give you a few examples of UVPs from my past clients because sometimes this concept feels a little bit intangible without having a concrete example in front of you. So, the first example that I want to give you is from my wedding world days. I used to do brand photography for wedding professionals specifically. And one of the wedding professionals that I worked with time and time again as a wedding vendor, I was also very privileged to be able to document part of her client experience and process to be able to showcase that to her potential clients. So, she was a luxury baker and she did the majority of her work within the wedding space. And her client experience was what ultimately set her apart from her competition. When she got a new inquiry for a wedding cake client, she would have an actual in person meeting with them. And she would chat about what they wanted their cake to look like over Earl Grey tea. What was really cool about this, there's a lot of really cool parts to this process, but Earl Grey was one of her signature flavors. So she was kind of priming them to be able to taste test her signature flavors in just a second by giving them that Earl Grey tea. But then, further than just chatting about what they wanted their cake to look like, she would pull out a sketchbook and actually sketch what the cake was going to look like so that they had a visual in real time of what their cake was going to look like on their wedding day. This is not something that anyone else in her market was doing and probably still isn't. So it made her stand out and attracted her ideal luxury client. So that piece of her client experience, that in person consultation, was what differentiated her from everyone else. Next up is one of my dear clients turned friends. She's also a branding photography client that I've been working with for 5 years now. She owns a Pilates studio in Lexington, Kentucky. So let me name drop our luxury baker. That's Sally with Cake Bee. She's in Northern Virginia. And the Pilates studio owner, that's Hannah Meredith. It's Pilates Bar Lex in Lexington, Kentucky. I will link all of their info in the show notes so you can go take a look at their profiles. At the Pilates studio, the studio itself was the UVP because the space itself, like the actual location, was a warm and welcoming location. It was always immaculate. It was every single time I've walked in that place, it has been sparkling, spick and span clean. And it is also aesthetically pleasing. Everything matches, everything coordinates. When you walk in, you feel like you're walking into a spa instead of a Pilates studio, besides, the reformers that are there. The owner has really created a community within that studio of members where it's like an exclusive club, an exclusive experience. The physical environment, paired with the emotional connection that the owner has with her clients, as well as the relationships developed between the clients themselves, is ultimately what has differentiated her from the competition in her market. Building a brand boils down to being liked, known, and ultimately trusted by your clients and customers. But let's first focus on being known. Have you heard the statistic about how a potential customer needs to encounter a brand 7 or more times before purchasing from them? Now, let me ask you this. What if a potential customer has encountered your brand 7 times, but doesn't realize it's the same brand? That means you've been putting in a whole lot of work into marketing your business, but the brand isn't consistent enough to land the sale because they don't know it's you. Consistency while building a brand is so important to top line sales. In fact, it could increase them by 33%. Yes, you could be missing out on a third of your sales because people don't know your business is your business. Fix all of this confusion by creating a consistent and cohesive brand across all client touchpoints using the Brand Strategy Framework mini course. This is where we'll walk through all the foundations of a solid brand, then audit your existing brand to finally implement the changes that need to be made in order to get you the brand you want and deserve. This DIY style course is perfect for the entrepreneur who's working on a budget but knows that something within their business doesn't quite hit right. Head to the Brand Strategy Framework course link in the show notes to take the next step in your brand's journey. Final example that I'm going to give, and this is specifically for my short-term rental owners. The Kentucky short-term rental that we own currently is on the Bourbon Trail. And the UVP for that property is actually built into the house itself. So the UVP for that property is that each of the 5 bedrooms has its own bathroom. This setup makes it pretty ideal for a large group of couples, like a large couples trip, maybe a college reunion or something that's coming to the area to drink bourbon because everyone has their own bedroom or bathroom. They don't have to share. So you might be with your college best friend and you might have had them as a roommate in college, but now you've been married for 10 years. It would be a little bit weird for two couples to share the same room. So everyone has their own space where they're able to wake up, brush their teeth, comb their hair, and then go out to the common areas to start the day. The other piece to that is that it's very rare, A, that you have a first floor master, but at that house, there are actually three bedrooms and bathrooms on the first floor, which actually makes this really attractive to elderly travelers because then they don't have to climb stairs. So the UVPs are that there are five bedrooms, each with their individual bathrooms, as well as the fact that there are three bedrooms on the first floor. This makes it way different than any of the other short term rentals in the area, really in the state. So the takeaway from this is that UVPs should be very specific, they should be very clear, and it should be very easy to communicate a direct benefit to your target audience or your ideal client. Okay, so let's now figure out how you can find what your UVP is. Here are some specific questions that you can ask yourself. First, what specific problem do I solve for my clients? So, in the example of the luxury cake baker, not only, of course, is she supplying them with a cake for their wedding day, but she's also supplying them with a luxurious experience that's going to go far beyond just the wedding day itself. In the instance of the Pilates studio, she is giving them community. She is giving them friends outside of just their wellness and their exercise habits. In the case of the short term rental, I specifically solved the problem of people not wanting to have to roll out of bed and look at another person that they don't normally sleep with. Everybody has their own space. Okay, so what specific problem do you solve for your clients? Two, what makes my process, my service, or my product different from my competitors? So, in that luxury cake baking example, she supplies a different experience by providing them the sketch at their consultation, not only to so they can see what their cake is going to look like, but it also, I'm pretty sure that she gave them the sketch so that it's like a memento after that. Number three, who is my ideal client and what do they care about most? So, the reason that these UVPs are so important is because it's what your ideal client is going to care about. So, in the example of the short term rental, when elderly couples come to that short term rental, they want to know that they're not going to have to climb stairs in order to get to their bedroom and their bathroom to go to sleep at night. So, that is not only the problem that I'm solving for them, it's also what they care about the most. Question number four, what is the biggest transformation or outcome that I provide? So, in terms of the Pilates studio, she not only provides a physical transformation because she is giving them the exercise habit and routine, she's also giving them a transformation in overall wellness. She is helping them mind, body, and spirit by creating that community within her Pilates studio so that they not only look forward to coming to the studio for that physical exercise, but also for that personal connection. And number five, the last question you should ask yourself to figure out what your UVP is if my business disappeared tomorrow, what would my customers miss the most? What would my customers miss the most? So, a lot of times as a realtor, you're harnessing what we call a personal brand. And I want you to kind of dive deep and figure out what it is about your personality that could be your UVP. Okay, what about your personality would your clients miss if you did not decide to do real estate tomorrow? And that would be where I would start because likely that part of your personality is just inherently baked into your client experience somehow. It kind of touches everything that has to do with your business. All right, to wrap up this episode, all about defining what your unique value proposition is, I would really, really encourage you to do a small self audit online to be able to kind of just see what your online presence represents. Take the bias out as much as you can from being the business owner or the realtor yourself and see what your potential clients see. This will help you determine whether or not your UVP is clear to your potential clients or not. Review your website, review your social media, review the content that's on your blog. Go through and add yourself to your initial email funnel again and see if the messaging is there that makes your UVP clear to your ideal client. Can a stranger immediately understand what makes you different? If you're having trouble with doing this, there are a couple ways to work with me so that I can help you define your UVP as well as other parts of your brand strategy. First is the DIY Brand Strategy Framework course. It provides a step by step guide on how to do a DIY brand analysis for yourself. Or if you'd like to work with me one on one, you're able to book a brand analysis, and I will link that below in the show notes. I already kind of went through that process earlier in this episode, but I do an online deep dive of everything that I can find about you and your business in order to determine whether or not I can find out your UVP. All right, thanks guys for listening today to today's episode. Here's to clarity, intention, and growth in your brand and your market. Talk to you next week. You just completed another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find this show and so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for all the resources mentioned today. See you next Wednesday, and as always, I'm here cheering you on as you build your dream brand and business.